We're moving on to our next story here, which is about Tucker Carlson. Now, ever since Tucker Carlson has left Fox News, he has been willing to talk a lot. He's been willing to reveal things about the media, not just Fox News, but all of it. What he saw when he was a part of mainstream media and why he feels the rest of us should be concerned. Now, this is not to cheerlead for Tucker Carlson, but it is to show you what we need to know is happening with mainstream media and what we need to know in reference to who is controlling the narrative, where the narrative comes from, and who is supposed to receive that narrative and what happens if you don't follow that playbook. I want to start with this first clip. He had an interview with Adam Carolla. I don't know if you guys know who he is. I knew Adam Carolla from this show that used to come on MTV called Loveline. It was back in the day. And he used to host that show with Dr. Drew, of all people. Like, now thinking back on this, I'm like, whoa, this is so different. Because I never knew these guys were political for the longest time. I just knew them from that show Loveline, where people would call in or they would appear in the audience on the TV show and they would ask Dr. Drew and Adam Carolla for relationship advice or advice about sex. Okay. Advice about sex. So when I did find out eventually that they are very much, into politics as well, I was kind of surprised. I'm like, the Loveline guys? So yeah. Anywho, let's get into this first clip here in this interview where Tucker Carlson is revealing something about Barack Obama that happened during his presidency that he says mainstream media was basically warned that they could not cover or report this story. Listen to this. I told you, they're everywhere. They control everything.
A lie, but I did go along with things I was uncomfortable with. I didn't ask difficult enough questions, and I wound up supporting something that was really bad for the United States and evil, in my opinion. So why did I do that? Part of it was I was young and stupid. Part of it was, I think, if I'm being honest, this was not conscious, but it's still true. I felt vulnerable. I had at the time 3 kids. I've got a mortgage. Like, do you really want to pick a fight with everybody when you're 31 and you're just trying to pay tuition and keep your shit together? Maybe you don't. And I think it's an age thing to a certain extent. Like at a certain age, whatever it is, if you're in the same business, and you feel like you've sort of done what you set out to do, you're like, I don't really need to impress anybody at this point. I'm not, in debt. Speaking for myself, I'm not rich. I will never be rich. I'm pretty sure of that. But I'm not in hock to anybody. I don't owe anybody anything. And my kids are grown. So it's like, why would I ever lie? I'm just in a different place. And so you can't, it's not that I lied intentionally before. I mean it. I didn't. I never have been in favor of lying. However, I think I did not allow myself to think certain things because they were just too counter narrative. They were like, everybody I knew, the world I lived in Northwest DC, like everyone works either directly for the government or is a parasite on government effectively, including people I love and know.
Let me pause here for just a second. There's 2 things I want to say. Number one, where he says not being rich. I don't have access to Tucker Carlson's finances, but from what I understand, isn't he a part of the Swanson family? So I would assume he may not consider himself being rich, but the rest of us do, damn it. Okay, the rest of us do. And 2, this point that he makes here about everybody in DC either works for the government or they may work for another party that is still affiliated with the government. That shit's true. Because when I graduated from college, a lot of my friends got jobs in DC. So DC is one of the cities that it's not uncommon for college graduates to move to if they're not already in the area, is because there are a lot of jobs, entry-level positions for college graduates where all they require from you is that you have a bachelor's degree. You don't necessarily have to have experience in the field. They're going to train you. Problem is, just about almost all of those jobs are either working with the federal government or you're working for a company or a think tank that is still attached to the federal government. So a lot of my friends, like, they worked for the VA, they worked for, they may have worked within Congress, but not in like this important role where you would know who they are, what their name is, like, right? Like they weren't like a staffer for someone, but they had a lower level job. So I think a lot of times when people think about like DC jobs, they're thinking about, oh, they must work for Congress or they must work in the White House. No, like all the federal jobs that exist in DC, whether it's even working for the DOJ or working for the Department of Transportation, like there's different ones that you can work for, but a lot of times you're working for the federal government. So that is true. Now, that being said, what does that mean? If you are in mainstream media in the DC area, it means that obviously your narrative is going to be controlled by the federal government. So you are essentially surrounded by a lot of people that live in like this DC bubble, and this is all they know. This is all they see. Again, if most of the people are working for the federal government, do you think they're going to allow Fox News or CNN News or the rest of them to paint a narrative about the federal government that is negative? Let's continue.
Really well. And the media is too, by the way. I mean, the media is reporting on government, but it's also dependent on government. You know, in 2008, it became really clear that Barack Obama had been having sex with men and smoking crack. And a guy came forward, Larry Sinclair, and said, I'll sign an affidavit. And he did. I'll take a lie detector. And he did.
Now, I just want to say this piece here about Barack Obama. I don't care who Barack Obama sleeps with. I don't care who he has a relationship with. That's really none of my business. I don't care what his sexuality is. That's not the problem, though. I don't even care. He says Barack Obama was doing drugs, paraphernalia. I got to say carefully here on YouTube. Again, I really don't care. I think that drugs should be legal anyway. I think all drugs should be legal, and it's up for the people to decide if that's what they want to use or what they want to do. I think it all should be legal and it all should be regulated, and then the government can actually tax it. That's just me. I also think that would actually decrease the crime rate. And I saw that happen in reference to Portugal when they legalized all drugs. But again, making it clear, I don't care about his sexuality. I don't care who he's having a relationship with. I don't care if he did drugs. That's not the problem. Here's the problem.
I smoked crack with Barack Obama and had sex with him. Well, that was obviously true. Nobody reported it, not because they were squeamish about sex or drugs, but because the Obama campaign said anyone who reports on this gets no access to the Obama campaign.
That's the problem. That's the problem. So obviously, if you work in mainstream media, you're not going to report on it because your network is not going to have, by the way, not just that reporter, your network will lose access to the Obama campaign. And obviously, you're going to have to report on them at some point in time, especially if they're president of the United States. That's the problem, people. It's not who he slept with. It's not what type of drugs he may or may not have been using. That's not the issue. The issue is the fact that they are controlling the narrative for mainstream media, telling them what they can and cannot cover. Now, if you're a journalist or you consider yourself to be a journalist and you hit the pavement, you go out and get the beat and get the story, imagine coming back and them saying, well, yeah, you can't cover this because it's damning information about the president that we don't want people to know. And if you do, you'll just lose access. Is that true journalism? And this is why more people have moved away to independent media because of that. So you have the government not only controlling what people can say on social media platforms like Twitter, for example, but also what mainstream media can say on these networks. It's all controlled. Now, last time I checked, when I was in elementary school, we learned about freedom of press. And we learned about freedom of speech. And I really believe that. But as I've gotten older, I've come to realize, do we really have free speech in this country? Do we really have freedom of press in this country? I don't think we do. Now let's continue.
And so they didn't report on it. So that happens. That's just one small example, but that happens all the time with lots of different issues.
Now,
And
do you believe that transpired, or do you believe the guy is legitimate, or both?
Oh, the Larry Sinclair story? Oh, that definitely happened. Oh, for sure. I mean, I've talked to Larry Sinclair about it, and definitely it happened. I mean, Larry Sinclair's been in and out of prison during one period. I mean, 40 years ago, he was in and out of prison. He's got a criminal record by definition. He's, poor. He's got a disordered life. He's missing a tooth. Like, he's not, an Atlantic fellow.
He is not what mainstream media would appear or would consider to be credible. In so many words, that's what Tucker Carlson is trying to say. And it's true. And it's disgusting, but it's true. If they see that he's poor, they see that you got a record. That's a big one. You got a record. And they see that you got a record. They see that you're poor. They see that you're missing teeth. You are no longer considered to be credible. And that is a shame, but that's how mainstream media works. And they used that against him. I'll show you this. We'll come back to the video. They used this against Larry Sinclair. Politico did a hit piece. Obama accuser has a long rap sheet. You see, there it is right there. So they show that he was wanted. They show that he was arrested. It says Sinclair is familiar to political junkies and reporters as the source of outlandish allegations about Senator Barack Obama, tales that begin with sex and drugs and moved on to murder. So it goes on to say here, the Duluth, Minnesota resident is the sort of figure who appears at the margins of every presidential campaign. Both President George W. Bush and Bill Clinton had their own obscure accusers with dramatic allegations. But as the old media ignores him, Sinclair has taken full advantage of the internet and a video which he makes his claims that have been viewed more than 900,000 times on YouTube. And so it goes on to say Sinclair's biography, though, may get in the way of that pitch. Public records and court filings reveals that he has a 27-year criminal record with a specialty in crimes involving deceit. So this is what they do, right? So if it's a narrative, it's a story that they don't want the people to hear, what do? They come out and they attack their character. So then it's not believed.
Going to the Aspen Ideas Festival, I think he has a record of deception. Obviously he does. But this story, if you listen to it in detail, is clearly true. I mean, I'm going to do an interview with him and you can hear it. And again, it's not going to change the world that Barack Obama likes dudes. I think this was well known. Barack Obama said so himself in a letter to his girlfriend. And by the way, that's kind of Barack Obama's business. I'm not attacking him for liking dudes. I'm just saying the amount of lying in the media about it was unbelievable. Like, people knew this was true, and it was quite obviously true at the time. And people who covered the campaign didn't say anything about it because they didn't want to lose access to the campaign. And that happens all the time up and down government. So it's almost like if you have a housekeeper, you think, she works for me. But if you have a housekeeper long enough, you realize, well, you actually work for her, and you get caught up in her dramas. Do you know what I mean? Like, yeah, there's a weird dynamic where you switch places with people.
And by the way,
so I just want to point out something here in reference to who you work for, right? So if you think about it, for example, like, even if that story, if they were allowed to report that story and that story did come out, so what? Who cares? Like, that's the part to me that just, it doesn't make any sense. Does it really matter who someone is with and who they're not with? Who cares? Like, who cares? But again, they wanted to paint this image of Barack Obama, right? Being this family man, the perfect image that they wanted for the Democratic Party, a Democrat candidate. And that would hurt the image that they had planned for Barack Obama. That's what that's really about. But who do they work for? All these people in the media, who are they really working for? Is it the government? Is it the CIA? Is it the FBI? Who controls the narrative? We're going to go to this next clip here in the interview. And this one is in reference to the CIA and what they do in reference to mainstream media. Listen to this.
I mean, I've heard that clip 1,000 times. Every time it renders me speechless. That's the end of democracy. And I don't know how you can, in the same sentence, say, I'm for democracy, and then say, actually, our country is run by a shadowy intel agency no one elected and no one has oversight over.
We don't have real democracy, but whatevs. We don't have real democracy, but I understand what he's saying in reference to shadow organizations. So let me go ahead and continue here.
I mean, it's not a democratic republic if the CIA can punish you as an elected president for doing things that they don't like. They're your employees. Speaking of the housekeeper taking over the house, they're like your housekeeper. Shut up and make the bed. Like the point of the CIA, as originally conceived, was to inform the president of what's going on around the world so he can make better foreign policy decisions. So the intel gathering apparatus of the US president, they work for him. They have no constitutional legitimacy outside of him.
But the president in turn, and this is the point he's trying to make with the housekeeper analogy, but the president in turn actually also works for the CIA. Who is running things? Even right now, when you look at Joe Biden, and obviously you hear Joe Biden, Mitch McConnell, Dianne Feinstein, obviously all three of these politicians are not at their best when it comes to their cognitive abilities right now. Who is making the decisions, people? Who's making the decisions for Dianne Feinstein? Are people just telling her how to vote? Who's making the decisions for Mitch McConnell right now? Mitch McConnell froze again. Are people just telling him how to vote? Who is making the decisions for the president of the United States? Let's continue.
Our system's super simple. The people who are elected by the public have all the power. They have employees to whom they delegate that power to get things done. But those employees have no independent power at all and no independent legitimacy. The CIA is a totally illegitimate criminal organization unless it is following precisely the orders of the elected president. Democrat or Republican, doesn't matter. So he's describing a crime. The people committing that crime in CIA should be in prison for long terms. That's the great threat to democracy right there. And the fact that no one on that set could even see that tells you how deeply corrupted they are. That's terrifying. And it's true, I happen to know. And I could bore you for hours, again, since I spent my life there and know a lot of people who work there. But the bottom line is there's no oversight at all. They were able to participate in the murder of a U.S. president and then hide that fact for 60 years by keeping those documents classified, which they still are. It's unbelievable. And it's happening in front of all of us, and nobody seems to care. But, you know, as the country declines and the democratic institutions weaken, and you wonder, how did this happen? Well, that's how it happened, right there.
What do you think?
And we'll just pause here for just a second. Very interesting conversation. I can't play, like, there's some parts of the video, the interview, I can't play on here because YouTube is ridiculous. But if you have time, I think you should watch this interview. I don't even watch Adam Carolla's show. This was sent to me by someone, and I was like, oh, this interview is actually pretty interesting. To definitely check this out as well. But I think we need to start asking these questions, like, why are people afraid to cover certain stories? Why are certain journalists put on kill lists, so to speak, right? Mainstream media, the CIA, and the president of the United States. I feel like all these items are connected. I feel like mainstream media is controlled by these government organizations. I feel like basically the State Department, I feel like they control mainstream media, and the shareholders like BlackRock and Vanguard also control the media. You don't invest in a network, millions of dollars in a network, and you're not getting something out of it in return. So that's something to think about. And if all those things are controlled by these government agencies like the FBI or the CIA, you want to talk about the CIA? Did you guys know one of the things that the CIA has done before in the past? I'm not sure if they're still doing this now, but this was actually admitted in an interview with an ex-CIA officer. This was back in the late 70s. Nick showed this one time on RBN. Did you guys know that the CIA also infiltrates the newspapers back then they infiltrated them and told them which stories they could and could not run. So if they were controlling the media, they are controlling the narrative. And then they would be the reason why a lot of people in this country are half asleep. That's very dangerous. This is why something like free speech is so incredibly important. Let's continue. I have one more clip. I think they stopped here.
The future holds. Is it?
I don't know.
I mean, are they going to let Trump be president?
No, of course. I mean, look, if, they protested him, they called him names. He won anyway. They impeached him twice on ridiculous pretenses. They fabricated a lot about what happened on January 6th in order to impeach him again. It didn't work. He came back. Then they indicted him. It didn't work. He became more popular. Then they indicted him 3 more times. And every single time his popularity rose. So if you begin with criticism, then you go to protest, then you go to impeachment, now you go to indictment, and none of them work, what's next? I mean, graph it out, man. We're speeding toward assassination, obviously. And
do you guys think they would go that far? If you're new, don't forget to smash that like button, guys. That helps me with the algorithm. Do you think they would go that far in reference to Donald Trump? Or do you think they would find a way to get rid of Donald Trump? I don't think they will. I think Trump knows a lot of powerful people, so I don't think they'll go that far. But if they prevent, I really believe this, if they prevent Donald Trump from running for president in 2024, I think a lot of people in this country are going to be really angry. I don't support Trump, but I think a lot of people in this country will be really angry. Some of you are saying yes. Some of you are saying maybe, possible. Aaron says 100%. Interesting. Let's continue a little bit more and we'll go to the third clip.
No one will say that, but I don't know how you can reach that conclusion. You know what I mean? Like, they have decided, permanent Washington, both parties have decided that there's something about Trump that's so threatening to them, they just can't have him.
Did you guys hear that part? Both parties have decided. See how they can come together for some type of bipartisanship when it's something that's in their favor, when they're looking at the status quo. Both parties have decided that they do not want Donald Trump to continue this presidential race. I really do believe, and I've said this before, I really do believe that the Republican Party and the Democrat Party, I believe behind closed doors, they working together in reference to deciding what is going to happen in American politics and maintaining the status quo. Some of these people go to the same country club, you guys, same country club that you can't even get into. Think about it. I think when it comes to the status quo, they work together just fine. Anything to keep the poor poor and to keep the workers working until you don't need them anymore.
They're putting him on trial in March of next year in the J6 case, which basically consists of trying to send him to prison for the rest of his life for complaining about the last election. That's literally what it is. Again, if this were happening in Moldova, the State Department would issue an all-hands-on-deck order to let the world know this is not a legitimate government. And yet our government is doing it. It's like it's really hard to overstate how bad this is. And I don't know where it's going, but there's a collision that's clearly imminent. And by the way, the president is senile in a way that's impossible to deny. Biden's not running the government, so like, I don't know, man. I've never been this worried about anything as I am about where this is going.
Well,
okay, and then we're going to go to the third clip and see what's really interesting. What he just said there, that's why he's not on Fox News anymore. That's exactly why. They would never let him say that on Fox News. Think about it. So this last piece here that I want to show you is Tucker referring to the media reading State Department talking points. Again, he has firsthand experience of this. So let's go ahead and get into this piece here.
Leave the nest and go independent and be so wildly successful really it bolsters my theory of when you're good and you have something to say, then you can go independent. And so when you broke off and you got let go and Don Lemon got let go at the same time, and all the entertainment shows were like Don Lemon and Tucker Carlson and Don Lemon, sort of both looked at as the face of these competing networks, Fox and CNN, both gone. What's the future hold? I just said no future for Don Lemon because he has nothing to say. He says what CNN says, and big future for Tucker because he's independent, he's a clear thinker, and he's a very clear voice, and people will find him. And I feel that there's a kind of meritocracy that is a field leveling that I'm really thankful for. I'm really thankful that guys like you are going to find a huge audience outside of Fox, and I don't think Don Lemon will.
I don't know. I mean,
where is Don Lemon? Before I saw this interview, I'm not going to lie. I know I recovered it when Don Lemon was fired, but then somewhere along the way, I forgot about Don Lemon. And so where is Don Lemon today? I haven't heard any new news about him, but that's interesting.
I've been fired a number of times, and every time I've been so grateful for it. I do think it changes you in a good way. Success is terrible for men, as you know, having been successful. The more successful you are, the more arrogant and stupid you get. And I don't know. I mean, I texted Don. We got fired the same day, and I texted him immediately, and I was like, "Congrats, man. This will be great." And then I'm kind of rooting for Don Lemon. I don't know, Don Lemon. But in general, I do think I know a lot of not very talented people in television, but I know some talented people in TV who are still there. And a couple of them I've talked to, and it's pretty nice out here. You should come. Part of the way those TV companies work, they're all the same in this regard, is they tell the on-air talent, like, you're a loser, you're nothing without us. They really get inside your head. I'm sure the movie business is the same way. And this is to lower the cost of talent. And they just constantly tell you how bad you are. No one ever says a good word to you. And I mean, I never had that because I refused to talk to anybody in management for many, many years. I never talked to.
Good call. When he said he refused to talk to anyone in management for many years, good call. Avoid management as much as possible. Any job. If you don't have to communicate with them, don't. Because even when you think you're just chit-chatting with them and it's just a little chat or conversation, they watching you. And they're wondering, what is she talking about? Oh, so she went out last weekend. Is that why she was late to work the next day? Yeah, avoid them. But I do want to say this piece here where he said that they get inside your head, especially those that are, lower level or whatever, making you feel like that you may not be great enough. I actually saw that in undergrad. So I majored in broadcast journalism and English, right? What I noticed in one of my classes, it was the announcing class. In one of my classes, our professor, yes, he hosts the evening news. Yes, he made a big deal out of it. Yes, he had ego. Let's just go ahead and cut to the chase there. He told, I don't think you can do this today. He told one of my classmates that there was no way that she was going to be a TV anchor because of the way that she looked. It's like, some of the things that were said to us, those of us that are millennials, some of the things that we heard, like when we were in school, like, you really can't say these things today. And it wasn't even one of those things, like, for those of us that were classmates, there were only 15 people in this class. That was one of the smaller classes. For those of us that were classmates, it's like, it was obvious what he was saying about her. Everybody knew that he was talking about her weight. And that wasn't cool. And I remember her trying her hardest to please him. The guy was an ass. I'm just going to be honest. She tried her hardest to please him and to prove him wrong. And he was so hard on her. And it was so disturbing. And I think, you know, me being so young at the time, like I didn't have the type of passion and gusto that I have now. But if I could go back to younger me, I really wish I would have said something to stand up for her in that class. None of us did. After class, we'd talk. When we'd go to lunch, we'd all say, God, you heard what he said to her? That's ridiculous. Da, da, da. But during class, all of us were afraid. Because the thing is, we were afraid that if we stood up for her, then we would become the new target. And what that professor did was wrong. But the thing is, in the media space, especially mainstream media, what Tucker Carlson is saying there is true, especially certain networks. When you get to the point where like you're on Fox News or CNN or MSNBC, that kind of thing, like they can tear you down and tear you apart. And like he said, they do that to keep the labor costs low, because that's the thing. Anybody else was ready and standing in line and ready to take your place if you don't want it. And they know that. So disturbing. I wonder what happened to him. Let me go
on. But most anchors do, and they just feel so bad about themselves and so insecure that like they're afraid to go anywhere. Like I need this stupid company filled with layers of dumb people making bad programming decisions in order to do my work. I mean, they really think that. So it's sad. I'm thinking of one person in particular who's like a legit old friend of mine who works at a big TV channel, and he's famous, quite famous, but they mistreat the hell out of him. And I'm always saying to him, you know, no one's creative in your world. Like, you don't work with any creative people. They're all bureaucrats and functionaries. You are creative. You should leave. If you take a pay cut the first couple of years, no big deal. You'll be happy because you can do your thing. You can make your art, you know, without someone in your face all the time. But he's been so brainwashed that he won't go. It's sad. Ugh.
All of those people on those networks like CNN or MSNBC or Fox News, all those people could leave those networks today and just start a YouTube channel or Rumble channel. And the thing is, their followers will follow them for the most part because they already have an audience. So if you already have an audience, all you got to do is to tell them to follow you, you know, just like Tucker Carlson did. Something to think about there. Interesting that people are so afraid.
What's your take on a Wolf Blitzer type? Because whenever I
take a close look at his history. Actually,
I'm always like, why would he do this? Why would he say a bunch of stuff he doesn't believe or he must know is untrue? Like what? He sat there as this sort of elder statesman of news and just sort of lied right through COVID and many other subjects. Why would he do that? Why would he do it to his legacy?
I worked with Wolf for years, never had a problem with him. It was always nice. That no one wants to hear it. I'm sure most people won't believe it, but I can tell you, having lived it for many years, it's true. The intel agencies have a big effect on what is broadcast on television and what you see on Facebook and Google as well. I mean, they're all up and down Facebook and Google, as I'm sure.
Let's pause here for just a second. Facebook and Google. Have you noticed if you Google certain things, at least on that first page, there are certain websites that will appear on page 1. And there are certain websites that are never on page 1. Who makes that decision? Think about it. What they do is they suppress information, whether it's not just YouTube, but Google as well. They suppress information that they don't really want the masses to see. So it may still be there, but how many Google pages are you going to have to go through to find it, what you're looking for? This is where something like DuckDuckGo became useful, right? But then DuckDuckGo also got compromised. So this is what they do. So if you want to rank high on Google, number one, it needs to be information that those government agencies actually find to be acceptable. And number two, some people pay to rank high on Google. Something to think about. Let me let him continue.
And, there are a lot of anchors who, including people I know well and have worked with at different networks. I'm thinking of one in particular, a national security reporter, who was just a mouthpiece for the Pentagon and the CIA and is knowingly telling lies on their behalf. It's very, very common, very common. And I can think of a number of people at CNN who I know for a fact are doing that exact thing. And so, they're reading government propaganda from the intel agencies knowingly. And I'm sure they've got some internal rationale that allows them to get up in the morning and face themselves despite having done something that's dishonest. But I'm just telling you, bottom line, I know that is true. I'm not speculating at all.
Okay. So one of the questions that you guys had before was, do they know do they believe the propaganda that they're actually selling the American people, or do they know that what they're saying is BS? According to Tucker Carlson, they know. How can you keep that job? Do you think people they become comfortable with the benefits that they receive with that job? They get comfortable with the prestige, getting to have their makeup done every day. Someone does their makeup for them. They can have a car come pick them up and take them to the studio at work. Do you think they get comfortable with that? And they don't want to leave that life behind? Because you can leave. You can leave. Like Tucker Carlson has his own thing on Twitter. Any of those people can leave and just start their, hey guys, I'm starting my own YouTube thing. Follow me over there and follow me on Rumble. They can leave. But so many choose to stay. Something to think about. Interesting discussion there. If you want to see the full conversation, again, that is on Adam Carolla's channel. It's called Tucker Carlson on his interview with Trump, Fox firing and America's future. First time I ever watched something from Adam Carolla, but I thought that was an interesting discussion. So thank you to who sent that to me. I can't remember. Let's go to some of the comments here. Lorez says, whoa, Loveline, Adam Carolla flashbacks. I know, MTV, man. Steve Wolfbrand says, Loveline was great. JB says, I remember Adam Carolla from The Man Show. The Man Show! He hosted with Jimmy Kimmel. Oh my God, I forgot about that. Thank you so much for the super sticker, Afro-Rican 82. Thank you for the super chat, Roger. Carlson has a net worth of 30 million. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. He rich.